The thunder of gunfire echoed across the dusty main street of Tonopah Junction, Nevada, as Bridget Taylor clutched her wounded brother against her chest, the blood from his shoulder staining her once pristine blue dress. It was 1878, and what had begun as a simple trip to town for supplies had erupted into chaos when the Hollister gang rode in, their faces twisted with vengeance and whiskey courage. As bullets splintered the wooden boardwalk around her, Bridget's eyes met those of a stranger, a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a storm-filled sky, who without hesitation spurred his Palomino stallion directly into the crossfire. Owen Zachary had ridden into Tonopah Junction that morning with no intention of staying longer than it took to water his horse and replenish his supplies. 3 years as a bounty hunter had taught him to avoid entanglements of any kind. But as he emerged from the general store to the sound of gunfire, he saw the young woman with copper hair cradling a bleeding man, trapped between the bank and the saloon with bullets raining down around her. "Stay down," Owen shouted, pulling his Colt revolver and returning fire as he urged his horse forward. The animal, trained for battle during the war between the states, responded to his touch without fear, dancing between the hail of bullets as Owen positioned himself between the Hollister gang and the terrified woman. "I'd die before I'd let you fall," he told her, his voice steady as the lead continued to fly around them. It wasn't bravado or romantic nonsense, just a simple statement of fact from a man who'd seen too much death to allow another innocent to perish when he could prevent it. Bridget looked up at the stranger, his broad-shouldered silhouette backlit by the harsh Nevada sun, and felt something shift inside her chest that had nothing to do with fear. In that moment, with chaos erupting around them, a connection formed that neither could have anticipated nor prevented. "My brother," she managed to say, her voice steadier than she felt. "They shot him. Please help us." Owen nodded once, continuing to fire strategically as he dismounted, keeping his body between the attackers and Bridget. "Can you ride?" he asked, his eyes scanning the street for the best escape route. "Yes," Bridget answered without hesitation. Growing up on a ranch outside of town, she'd been riding since before she could walk. "Good." Owen whistled sharply, and his Palomino edged closer. "We need to get your brother somewhere safe. I'll help you get him on, then you climb up behind. I'll cover you until you're clear of town, then catch up." "I won't leave you," Bridget protested, even as she helped Owen lift her semi-conscious brother Michael onto the saddle. Something that might have been admiration flickered in Owen's eyes. "Not asking you to leave me, madam, just giving you a head start." He handed her the reins. "Head north out of town about 2 miles. There's a lined shack by the creek. Wait for me there." Before Bridget could argue further, a fresh volley of bullets splintered the hitching post beside them. Owen fired back, his movements calm and deliberate. "Go. Now." With one fluid motion, Bridget swung herself up behind her brother, securing her arm around his waist. She gave Owen one last look, a glance that contained gratitude, fear, and something else neither of them could name before she dug her heels into the Palomino's flanks and galloped toward the northern edge of town. Owen provided covering fire, his accuracy forcing the Hollister men to duck for cover. As Bridget disappeared from view, he backed toward the livery stable, knowing he needed to find another mount if he was going to catch up. The livery owner, an old man named Granger who'd known Owen years before, didn't hesitate when Owen burst through the door. "Take the bay," Granger said, already saddling the horse. "Saw what you did out there. Them Hollister boys have been terrorizing this town for months, sheriffs in their pocket." Owen checked his ammunition. "Who's the woman and her brother?" "Bridget Taylor. Runs the T-Bar-T ranch with her brother since their pa passed last winter. Good people. That boy Michael's barely 20. What they want with them, don't know. Owen replied, mounting the bay, "but I aim to find out." As Owen rode out of town on a path different from the one Bridget had taken, to throw off any possible pursuit, he considered what he knew about the Hollister gang. Their leader, Jeb Hollister, had once been a Confederate officer before turning outlaw after the war. The gang specialized in extortion and land grabs, usually targeting vulnerable homesteaders and small ranchers. If they were after the Taylor Ranch, there had to be a reason. Meanwhile, Bridget had reached the line shack, a small, rough-hewn cabin that offered minimal shelter but was well concealed by a stand of cottonwood trees. She managed to get Michael inside and onto the single cot, where she used water from the nearby creek to clean his wound. The bullet had passed through his shoulder, missing any vital areas, but he'd lost a lot of blood. "Who was that man?" Michael asked weakly as Bridget tore strips from her petticoat to create a bandage. "I don't know," she admitted, her hands working steadily despite her racing thoughts. "But he saved our lives." "Hollister," Michael started, then grimaced in pain. "They came to the bank, said they knew about Pa's claim." Bridget's hands stilled. "What claim?" Michael's eyes fluttered closed. "The silver mine, North Ridge. Pa never recorded it, said it was insurance." Before Bridget could question him further, the sound of approaching hooves sent her heart racing. She grabbed the rifle she'd taken from Owen's saddle and positioned herself at the window, prepared to defend her brother with her last breath if necessary. Relief flooded through her when she recognized Owen's tall form, though he was riding a different horse. She opened the door as he dismounted, noting the blood on his sleeve. "You're hurt," she said immediately. Owen shook his head. "Just a graze. Your brother." The bullet went through clean. "He's lost blood, but I think he'll be all right." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for what you did back there." Owen's expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes softened. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Bridget said firmly. "They wouldn't have." She stepped aside to let him enter the cabin. "Michael said something about our father having a silver claim that he never recorded. I think that's what the Hollisters are after." Owen's brow furrowed. Silver would explain a lot. "The Hollisters have been buying up mining interests all through Nevada territory." He moved to check on Michael, examining the makeshift bandage with an expert eye. "You did a good job here. Were you a nurse during the war?" "No, I was too young. But our ranch hands were always getting themselves hurt, and my mother taught me before she passed." Bridget watched as Owen gently probed around Michael's wound. "Who are you?" "Really?" Owen straightened and met her gaze directly. "Owen Zachary, former Union cavalry, now a bounty hunter." He paused. "I've been tracking the Hollisters for 6 months. They robbed a bank in Sacramento, killed 3 people including a young girl." Bridget absorbed this information. "So helping us was just part of your job." Something that might have been guilt flickered across Owen's features. "At first," he admitted, "but I didn't expect them to make their move in broad daylight, and I didn't know they were after you specifically." He glanced at Michael. "We need to get him to a proper doctor." "The nearest one is in Carson City," Bridget said. "That's 2 days' ride." "There's a mining camp about 10 miles east of here," Owen countered. "Silver Peak. They have a doctor. Not the finest, but better than nothing." "We can't go back to town," Bridget argued, "and I don't know if Michael can ride that far." "I know," Owen said, his voice gentling in a way that surprised them both. "But we can't stay here either. The Hollisters will have men searching every inch of this territory by nightfall." As if to punctuate his words, Michael stirred on the cot, his face flushed with fever. Bridget pressed a hand to his forehead and exchanged a worried glance with Owen. "We'll rest until dusk," Owen decided. "Then we'll head for Silver Peak. I can fashion a travois for your brother." He moved toward the door. "I'll keep watch. Try to get some rest." Bridget wanted to protest, to insist she take first watch, but exhaustion was already pulling at her limbs. "Wake me in 2 hours," she said instead. "You need rest too." Owen nodded, though they both suspected he had no intention of waking her. As he stepped outside, Bridget sank onto the floor beside her brother's cot, her mind whirling with questions about Owen Zachary, the Hollister gang, and her father's secret silver claim. Despite the danger surrounding them, she found herself drawing strength from the memory of Owen riding through a hail of bullets to reach her, his voice steady as he promised to die before letting her fall. Outside, Owen secured the horses and found a position that gave him a clear view of the approaches to the cabin. His thoughts, usually focused solely on his quarry, kept returning to the woman inside. Bridget Taylor was unlike anyone he'd encountered in his travels, brave, resourceful, and fiercely protective of her family. She'd maintained her composure in a situation that would have broken many men, let alone a woman who couldn't be more than 25. The afternoon stretched on, the Nevada heat gradually giving way to the cooler air of early evening. Owen remained vigilant, his experienced eyes scanning the landscape for any sign of pursuit. When he heard the cabin door open behind him, he wasn't surprised to find Bridget approaching with a cup of water. "I thought you were going to rest," he said, accepting the cup gratefully. "I did for a while," she replied, settling beside him on the fallen log he'd chosen as his lookout post. "Michael's fever has broken. I think he'll be strong enough to travel by nightfall," Owen nodded. "Good." He hesitated, then asked, "Your ranch, the T-Bar T, is it just you and your brother now?" Bridget's face clouded. "Since Pa died, yes. We have a few hands, good men who have been with us for years." They were in Carson City picking up supplies when all this happened. She looked at him directly. What will the Hollisters do next? Owen appreciated her directness. If they want that silver claim badly enough, they won't stop. Men like Jeb Hollister are used to taking what they want. He saw the fear flicker in her eyes and added, "But they're also cowards at heart. They prefer easy targets. Once they realize you have protection, they might reconsider." "Protection," Bridget repeated. "You mean you?" "For now," Owen said, his voice carefully neutral. "Once we get to Silver Peak, I can send a telegraph to the federal marshal in Carson City. This could be the break I've been waiting for to bring the Hollisters to justice." Bridget studied him for a moment. "That's not the only reason you're helping us, is it?" Owen met her gaze, finding himself unable to dissemble beneath those clear green eyes. "No," he admitted. "It's not." Before he could elaborate, a distant movement caught his attention. He raised a hand to silence any further conversation, his body tensing as he focused on the ridge to the south. "Riders," he said quietly, "3 of them coming from town." Bridget's breath caught. "Hollisters, most likely. We need to move." Owen stood, gathering his rifle. "Get your brother ready, we're leaving." The next 15 minutes passed in a blur of efficient activity. Owen quickly constructed a travois using branches from the surrounding trees and blankets from the cabin. Michael, though weak, was alert enough to understand the urgency of their situation. As Owen secured him to the improvised stretcher, Bridget gathered their meager supplies. "The ridge to the east will give us cover," Owen explained as he attached the travois to his borrowed bay. "Once we're over it, we'll head north for a few miles before cutting east to Silver Peak. With luck, we'll lose them in the hills." Bridget mounted Owen's palomino, adjusting her skirts as best she could. In the fading light, with her copper hair partially escaped from its pins and her face smudged with dirt, she still managed to look both vulnerable and determined, a combination that stirred something in Owen's chest that he'd thought long buried. "Stay close," he told her. "If we get separated, keep heading northeast. The mining camp is in a valley with 3 distinctive peaks around it, can't miss it." Bridget nodded, her hand moving to the rifle secured in her saddle holster. "I won't get separated," she said with quiet conviction. They set out just as the sun disappeared behind the western mountains, the twilight providing enough cover for their escape while still allowing them to navigate the rough terrain. Owen led the way, constantly scanning for signs of pursuit, while Bridget stayed close to the travois, monitoring her brother's condition. For nearly an hour they traveled in tense silence, the only sounds the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves and the occasional groan from Michael when they traversed particularly uneven ground. They had just crested the eastern ridge when Owen raised his hand, signaling a halt. "What is it?" Bridget whispered, moving her mount alongside his. "Listen," Owen replied. In the distance, they could hear the unmistakable sound of horses at a gallop, coming from the direction they'd just left. "They've found our trail," Owen said grimly. "We need to pick up the pace." As they urged their horses forward, the terrain grew increasingly rugged, with narrow passes and steep inclines that slowed their progress, despite the growing urgency. The travois bounced over the rocky ground, eliciting muffled cries of pain from Michael that tore at Bridget's heart. "We can't keep this up," she said to Owen as they paused to allow the horses a brief rest. "Michael won't survive much more of this jolting." Owen's face was a mask of concentration as he considered their options. "There's an old mining tunnel about half a mile ahead. If we can reach it, we might be able to hide until they pass by." Bridget nodded, trusting his judgment despite the fear clawing at her insides. As they resumed their journey, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, suggesting their hunters were gaining ground. The abandoned mine entrance appeared suddenly a dark hole in the side of the hill, partially obscured by scrub brush and fallen rocks. Owen dismounted quickly, helping Bridget down before they carefully maneuvered the travois from the horse. "Take Michael inside," Owen instructed, handing Bridget his spare revolver. "I'll hide the horses and lay a false trail." Bridget wanted to protest to insist they stay together, but she knew he was right. Michael's safety had to come first. With a nod, she helped Owen carry her brother into the darkness of the tunnel, settling him on the ground as comfortably as possible. "I'll be back," Owen promised, his hand briefly squeezing hers before he disappeared into the night. Left alone with her semi-conscious brother, Bridget positioned herself at the entrance of the tunnel, the revolver ready in her hand as she peered into the darkness. Minutes stretched like hours as she strained to hear any sound above the pounding of her own heart. When a shadow detached itself from the surrounding darkness, Bridget nearly fired before recognizing Owen's familiar outline. He slipped into the tunnel beside her, his breathing slightly labored. "I led the horses about a quarter-mile north before setting them loose," he explained in a whisper. "Then I doubled back, leaving a trail heading east. With luck, they'll follow it until morning." "And if they don't?" Bridget asked. Owen's eyes met hers in the darkness. "Then we fight." Something in his tone, a mixture of determination and resignation, made Bridget reach for his hand. "We'll fight together," she said firmly. For a moment, Owen looked startled, as if unaccustomed to such declarations of solidarity. Then his expression softened and he nodded. "Together," he agreed. They settled deeper into the tunnel, positioning themselves where they could see the entrance while remaining concealed in the shadows. Michael drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring names and phrases that made little sense to either of them. "He's dreaming about our father," Bridget explained after one such episode. "They were very close. When Pa died, it hit Michael harder than anyone." "How did your father die?" Owen asked quietly. Bridget's face grew solemn in the dim light. "An accident at the ranch." "At least that's what everyone said. He was found at the bottom of a ravine with his horse nearby. The assumption was that the horse spooked and he fell." She hesitated. "But Pa was an excellent rider. It never made sense to me." Owen absorbed this information. "And this silver claim, did he ever mention it to you?" "Never," Bridget said, shaking her head. But Pa was the type to keep things close to his chest. After the war, he became even more private. She looked at Owen curiously. "Where were you during the war?" "Union cavalry, as I said," Owen replied. "Fought mostly in the Western Theater, Missouri, Arkansas." His voice grew distant, as if the memories were physically taking him back in time. "After Appomattox, I couldn't go back to Illinois. Everything felt changed. So I drifted west, worked as a scout for the Army for a while, then started tracking bounties." "And your family?" Bridget asked gently. A shadow passed over Owen's features. "Lost my father and older brother at Shiloh. Mother passed while I was still fighting. There was nothing to go back to." Bridget's hand found his in the darkness. "I'm sorry." Owen accepted her touch, finding unexpected comfort in the simple gesture. "It was a long time ago," he said, though they both knew some wounds never truly healed. Their conversation was abruptly cut short by the sound of approaching horses. Owen immediately moved to the tunnel entrance, motioning for Bridget to stay back with her brother. From his vantage point, he could make out 4 riders moving slowly along the ridge, scanning the ground by the light of a half-moon. "Hollister men," Bridget whispered when he rejoined her. Owen nodded. "They're searching the area. Must not have bought my false trail." They waited in tense silence as the riders drew closer to their hiding place. Owen positioned himself in front of Bridget and Michael, his rifle at the ready. When a voice called out so close that it seemed to be just outside the tunnel entrance, Bridget had to stifle a gasp. "Spread out," the voice ordered. "Check every crevice and hole. Jeb wants the girl in that map, and he wants him tonight." Owen and Bridget exchanged a glance. "Map? What map?" Before they could consider the implications, the beam of a lantern swept across the tunnel entrance, forcing them to press deeper into the shadows. "I'll check this old mine shaft," a different voice announced, followed by the sound of boots on gravel. Owen raised his rifle, preparing to fire as soon as the man appeared in the entrance. But just as the figure began to materialize in the darkness, a distant gunshot rang out, followed by a shout. "Riders coming from the east. Looks like a mining camp patrol." The man at the tunnel entrance hesitated, then retreated. "Let's go. We'll pick up their trail at first light." The sounds of the Hollister men mounting up and riding away filled Owen and Bridget with cautious relief. Still, they remained motionless for several long minutes, ensuring the danger had truly passed. "A patrol from Silver Peak," Owen finally said. "Lucky timing." "Very lucky," Bridget agreed, though her mind was still caught on what the Hollister man had said. "Owen, they mentioned a map." "What map could they be talking about?" Owen frowned thoughtfully. "Your father's silver claim. If he never recorded it officially, he might have made a map showing its location." He glanced at Michael. "Your brother said your father called it insurance." "Perhaps the map is hidden somewhere at your ranch." "But why would they think I have it?" Bridget asked, confused. "Maybe they don't know for certain," Owen suggested. "They might be grabbing at straws, especially if the claim is as valuable as they seem to think." Michael stirred, his eyes opening with more clarity than they'd shown since his injury. "Bridget," he called weakly. She was at his side instantly. "I'm here, Michael. You're safe." Michael licked his dry lips. "The map. Pa gave it to you, the locket. Your birthday." Bridget's hand flew to her throat, where a silver locket hung on a chain, a gift from her father on her 21st birthday just months before his death. "My locket. But I've opened it many times. There's nothing inside but a small portrait of Mother." Michael shook his head weakly. "False bottom," he managed before exhaustion claimed him once more. With trembling fingers, Bridget removed the locket and handed it to Owen. "Can you open it?" "My hands are shaking too much." Owen took the locket carefully, examining it in what little light filtered into the tunnel. It was a simple silver oval, unremarkable except for the delicate engraving of a rose on its face. He pried it open to reveal, as Bridget had said, a tiny portrait of a woman with the same copper hair as her daughter. "Try pressing on the edges," Bridget suggested, watching intently. Owen applied gentle pressure to the perimeter of the locket's interior. After a moment of manipulation, there was a soft click, and the backing of the portrait compartment popped loose, revealing a small, tightly folded piece of paper beneath. "He was telling the truth," Bridget breathed, taking the paper from Owen with reverent hands. She unfolded it carefully, revealing a detailed map drawn in her father's precise hand. At the top were the words North Ridge Silver Claim and a series of coordinates. Owen studied the map over her shoulder. "This is detailed work. Your father must have been an engineer or surveyor." "He was a surveyor before the war," Bridget confirmed. "He worked for the government, mapping territories in California and Nevada." She traced the lines of the map with her fingertip. "If the Hollisters are this desperate to get their hands on it, the claim must be substantial." "More than substantial," Owen said grimly. "If this location is accurate, your father discovered one of the richest veins in the territory. This could be worth millions." The enormity of this revelation left them both silent for a moment. Finally, Bridget refolded the map and tucked it securely into her bodice. "What do we do now?" she asked. Owen considered their options. "We wait until dawn, then continue to Silver Peak." "Your brother needs a doctor, and we need to send word to the federal marshal." He hesitated, then added, "After that, we should head to your ranch. If the Hollisters think the map might be hidden there, they won't hesitate to tear the place apart looking for it." Bridget nodded, trying not to think about what might happen to their home and the loyal hands who worked there. "And then," Owen met her gaze steadily, "then we use the map as bait, set a trap for Jeb Hollister and end this once and for all." As the first light of dawn filtered into the mine tunnel, they prepared to depart. Michael's condition had stabilized enough that he was able to sit up and take some water, though he remained too weak to ride independently. Owen reconstructed the travois, securing it to his bay once more. "Silver Peak is about 3 hours' ride from here," he told Bridget as he helped her mount the Palomino. "If we're lucky, we'll reach it before noon." Their journey resumed with both greater hope and greater urgency. The discovery of the map had clarified their situation, but it had also raised the stakes considerably. The Hollisters wouldn't rest until they had the map, or until they were behind bars. The terrain grew more hospitable as they descended from the hills toward the mining camp, allowing them to make better time. By mid-morning, they caught sight of smoke rising from the cluster of buildings that comprised Silver Peak, a ramshackle but thriving community built around several productive silver mines. As they approached the outskirts of the camp, they were met by a group of mounted men, the patrol that had inadvertently saved them the night before. "Hold up there," called the leader, a burly man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest. "State your business." Owen raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "We need a doctor. This man's been shot and we've been riding hard to reach you." The sheriff eyed them suspiciously. "Who did the shooting?" "Hollister gang," Owen replied, watching recognition dawn on the sheriff's face. "They ambushed these folks in Tonopah Junction yesterday." At the mention of the notorious outlaws, the sheriff's demeanor changed. "Hollister, you say? Bring him on in. Doc Miller's place is just off the main street." He looked more closely at Owen. "You look familiar, mister. Have we met?" Owen shook his head. "Don't believe so. Name's Owen Zachary. I'm a bounty hunter tracking the Hollisters for the bank job in Sacramento." "Zachary," the sheriff repeated, nodding slowly. "Heard of you. They say you brought in the Cassidy brothers last year." He extended his hand. "Sheriff Bill Dawson. Welcome to Silver Peak." With the sheriff's escort, they made their way into the heart of the mining camp. Silver Peak was a typical boomtown, hastily constructed buildings lining muddy streets, with the constant sound of stamp mills crushing ore in the background. Miners, merchants, and ladies of questionable virtue moved about their business, many pausing to stare at the newcomers. Doc Miller's establishment stood out by virtue of the red cross painted on its door. The doctor himself, a thin man with spectacles and a remarkably steady hand despite his apparent fondness for whiskey, immediately took charge of Michael's care. "Gunshot wound, eh?" he commented as he examined Michael's shoulder. "Clean through, at least." "You did a good job with the initial treatment, miss. Probably saved his arm." Bridget hovered anxiously as the doctor cleaned and properly bandaged the wound, then administered laudanum for the pain. "Will he be all right?" she asked. "Barring infection, yes," Doc Miller assured her. "He's young and strong. I'd recommend at least 3 days of rest before he travels again, though." Owen and Bridget exchanged concerned glances. 3 days would give the Hollisters ample time to regroup and possibly discover their whereabouts. "Is there a telegraph office in town?" Owen asked the doctor. "At the assayer's office," Doc Miller replied. "Though it's been acting up lately. Sometimes messages get through, sometimes they don't." Once Michael was settled comfortably in the doctor's back room, Owen and Bridget stepped outside to confer with Sheriff Dawson, who had waited for them. "We need to send a telegram to the federal marshal in Carson City," Owen explained, "and then figure out how to protect Miss Taylor's ranch. The Hollisters are after a silver claim her father discovered." Sheriff Dawson stroked his beard thoughtfully. "I've only got 3 deputies, and we're stretched thin protecting the mines around here, but I can spare 1 man to ride with you to the Taylor place." He looked at Bridget. "How many hands you got there, miss?" "4 when they're all present," Bridget replied. "But they were in Carson City when this started. I don't know if they've returned." "Let's send that telegram first," Owen decided. "Then we'll plan our next move." The assayer's office was located at the far end of the main street, a substantial building that spoke to the importance of its function in a mining community. Inside, they found the assayer himself, a portly man named Hoffman, arguing with what appeared to be a mine owner over the quality of an ore sample. 58% silver content, not a fraction more, Hoffman insisted, jabbing a stubby finger at a ledger. "My tests don't lie, Sanderson." The mine owner, a tall, lean man with the hard look of someone accustomed to getting his way, noticed Owen and Bridget's entrance and abruptly ended the argument. "We'll continue this discussion later, Hoffman," he said coldly, before brushing past the newcomers. Hoffman adjusted his spectacles and turned his attention to Owen and Bridget. "What can I do for you folks?" "We need to send a telegram to Marshal James Earp in Carson City," Owen said, pulling out a small notebook and pencil to draft the message. "Earp," Hoffman repeated, his eyebrows rising. "Relation to Wyatt, his cousin," Owen confirmed as he wrote. "James has jurisdiction over this part of Nevada territory." While Owen composed the telegram, Bridget noticed Hoffman studying her with unusual intensity. "Is something wrong, Mr. Hoffman?" she asked. The assayer blinked, then smiled apologetically. "Forgive me, miss. You remind me of someone I knew years ago, a surveyor named Taylor. Any relation?" Bridget stiffened. "My father," she replied cautiously. "Thomas Taylor." Hoffman's face brightened. "I thought so. The resemblance is striking." "Your father and I worked together briefly in '65, right after the war. He was mapping potential mining sites north of here." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Found some promising locations, too, if I recall correctly." Before Bridget could respond, Owen handed his completed telegram to Hoffman. "How soon can this be sent?" Hoffman read the message quickly, a brief notification to Marshal Earp about the Hollister gang's location and activities, with a request for immediate assistance in Tonopah Junction and Silver Peak. "I can send it right away, but as I mentioned to the doctor earlier this week, the line's been unreliable. Storms in the mountains, most likely. Owen paid the fee, and Hoffman immediately began tapping out the message on his telegraph key. After several minutes of staccato clicking, he frowned. "No acknowledgement," he reported. "Could be the lines down again. I'll keep trying periodically throughout the day." Thanking him, Owen and Bridget left the assayer's office, both concerned about this new complication. Without confirmation that help was on the way, they would have to rely on their own resources to deal with the Hollisters. "What did you make of Hoffman knowing your father?" Owen asked as they walked back toward the doctor's office. Bridget considered the question. "It's not surprising they would have crossed paths. As I said, Pa was surveying this region before settling at our ranch." She glanced at Owen. "What concerns me is how easily he identified me if the Hollisters come asking questions in Silver Peak." "They'll learn we're here," Owen finished grimly. "We need to move quickly. How far is your ranch from here?" "About 15 miles southwest," Bridget replied. "A half-day's ride under normal circumstances." Owen nodded decisively. "We'll leave at first light tomorrow." "Your brother can stay here under the doctor's care and the sheriff's protection while we check on your ranch and set our trap for the Hollisters." As they reached the doctor's office, Bridget stopped, turning to face Owen directly. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice soft but insistent. "You could have handed us over to the sheriff and continued your hunt for the Hollisters on your own. Instead, you're risking your life for people you barely know." Owen's weathered face remained impassive, but his eyes, those storm-colored eyes that had first caught Bridget's attention during the shootout, revealed a depth of emotion he rarely allowed others to see. "When I rode between those bullets in Tonopah Junction," he said slowly, "I made you a promise. I intend to keep it." It wasn't the complete answer, and they both knew it. But it was all Owen seemed prepared to offer at that moment, and Bridget accepted it with a nod. Whatever his reasons, Owen Zachary had become their champion, and in the harsh reality of the frontier, such alliances were not to be questioned too closely. They spent the remainder of the day making preparations. Sheriff Dawson assigned his most experienced deputy, a former Texas Ranger named Cooper, to accompany them to the Taylor Ranch. Owen purchased additional ammunition and supplies, while Bridget sat with Michael, explaining their plan. "I should be going with you," Michael protested weakly, his face still pale from blood loss and medication. "You'd slow us down," Bridget said bluntly, though she softened the words with a gentle touch to his uninjured shoulder. "Besides, I need to know you're safe while we deal with the Hollisters." Michael studied his sister's face. "This bounty hunter Zachary, you trust him," Bridget didn't hesitate, "with my life. He's already proven that." Michael seemed satisfied with this answer. "Be careful, Bridge. The Hollisters aren't just outlaws. They're connected to powerful people. There's a reason Pa kept that claim secret." This new piece of information troubled Bridget, but before she could press for details, Michael drifted back to sleep, the laudanum taking effect once more. She rejoined Owen and Deputy Cooper at the small hotel where they'd taken rooms for the night, sharing her brother's cryptic warning. "Connected to powerful people," Owen repeated thoughtfully. "That would explain how they've evaded justice for so long. And why they're so desperate to get their hands on your father's claim," Cooper added. "Silver's been the backbone of Nevada's economy since the Comstock Lode. A new rich vein could shift the balance of power significantly." That night, as Bridget tried to sleep in her sparse hotel room, her mind whirled with questions about her father's secret, the Hollister gang's true motivations, and most persistently, Owen Zachary. The bounty hunter was an enigma, hard and dangerous on the surface, yet capable of profound gentleness and sacrifice. In the short time since their paths had crossed, he had become essential to her in ways that both comforted and frightened her. Morning arrived with a muted golden light filtering through the thin curtains of Bridget's room. She dressed quickly in clothes borrowed from the doctor's wife, a practical riding skirt and blouse that would allow her to move more freely than her torn and blood-stained dress. Her locket, with its precious hidden map, remained secure around her neck. When she joined Owen and Deputy Cooper in the hotel's small dining room, she found them in deep conversation with Sheriff Dawson, who looked troubled. "What's happened?" she asked immediately. "Hollister men," the sheriff replied grimly. "3 of them rode into town about an hour ago. They're at the saloon now, asking questions." Owen's expression hardened. "Did anyone tell them about us?" "Not that I know of," Dawson said. "I've warned my people to keep quiet, but in a place like this." He shrugged eloquently. "Word spreads." "We need to leave now," Owen decided, standing abruptly. "Through the back way, if possible." The sheriff nodded. "Cooper knows a trail that skirts the main road. It's rougher going, but you'll avoid being seen." As they hastily finished their breakfast and gathered their gear, Bridget insisted on seeing Michael once more before departing. At the doctor's office, she found her brother awake and more alert than he'd been since the shooting. "The Hollisters are in town," she told him without preamble. "We're leaving now." Michael gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Bridge, listen to me. There's something you need to know about Pa's claim." He glanced toward the door to ensure they were alone. "It's not just silver." The assay showed traces of gold, 2 significant amounts. Pa kept it quiet because he didn't want to start another gold rush. He was going to develop it slowly, use the profits to benefit the whole region. Bridget absorbed this revelation with growing understanding. That's why the Hollisters want it so badly, and why Pa called it insurance. It was his legacy for us. Michael nodded. "Be careful who you trust with this information. Even the law isn't always on the side of what's right." With a final embrace and a promise to return soon, Bridget rejoined Owen and Cooper, who were waiting with the horses behind the doctor's office. They mounted quickly and set off along a narrow trail that wound through the scrubby hills west of Silver Peak. For several hours, they rode in watchful silence, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. Cooper, a laconic man in his 50s with the leathery complexion of someone who'd spent his life outdoors, led the way with the confidence of one who knew the territory intimately. "How much farther to the ranch?" Owen asked during one such rest stop. "About 5 miles, Cooper replied, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. "We'll reach the east pasture first, then the main house and outbuildings." Bridget, who had been quiet for much of the journey, suddenly stiffened. "Smoke," she said, pointing southwest, "coming from the direction of the ranch." Owen and Cooper followed her gaze, both spotting the thin column of dark smoke rising against the clear sky. Without a word, they remounted and urged their horses to a gallop, caution temporarily abandoned in the face of this new threat. As they crested a rise overlooking the T-Bar T Ranch, the scene below confirmed their worst fears. The main house was engulfed in flames, with several smaller fires burning among the outbuildings. Even from a distance, they could see figures moving about, at least a dozen men, some on horseback, others on foot. "Hollisters," Cooper growled, his hand moving to his revolver. "No," Owen countermanded, grabbing the deputy's arm. "Look at how they're organized. Those aren't just outlaws, they're a professional operation." Bridget's heart pounded as she took in the systematic destruction of her home. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Owen assessed the situation rapidly, his experienced eye noting details that others might miss: the positioning of lookouts, the disciplined movement of the search parties, the quality of the horses and equipment. "We can't take them head on," he decided. "There are too many and they're too well organized. We need to get closer, find out who's leading them, and try to locate your ranch hands." using the natural cover provided by the rolling terrain and scattered juniper trees. They approached the ranch from the northeast, leaving their horses concealed in a small gully before proceeding on foot. As they drew nearer, the extent of the devastation became clearer, and so did the identity of at least some of their adversaries. "Those men by the corral," Cooper whispered, pointing to 3 figures directing the loading of horses into a portable chute. "They're wearing badges." "Silver Peak Mining Company Security." Bridget looked to Owen in confusion. "Mining Company Security? What would they have to do with this?" Owen's expression was grim. "Remember what your brother said about powerful connections. The silver companies practically own this part of Nevada. If they've aligned with the Hollisters." He left the implication hanging. As they watched from their hiding place at the edge of a stand of cottonwoods, a familiar figure emerged from the burning remains of the barn, the mine owner they had seen arguing with Hoffman at the assayer's office in Silver Peak. "Sanderson," Cooper identified him. "Owns the Bluebonnet mine, one of the largest in the region. Mean as a rattlesnake and twice as dangerous." Sanderson appeared to be giving orders to both the Hollister men and the mining company security, confirming Owen's theory about an alliance. Beside him stood a tall, broad-shouldered man with a shock of white blonde hair visible beneath his hat. Jeb Hollister himself, unmistakable from the wanted posters Owen had studied for months. "There's movement by the bunkhouse," Bridget whispered urgently. "My God, it's our hands." 4 men, their hands bound behind them, were being marched at gunpoint toward a wagon. Even from this distance, Bridget could see blood on their clothes and faces, evidence of rough treatment. "We have to help them," she insisted, her hand tightening on the rifle she carried. Owen placed a restraining hand on her arm. "We will," he promised, "but not like this. If we rush in, we'll all be killed or captured." "Then what do you suggest?" Cooper asked, clearly torn between his duty to uphold the law and the recognition that they were vastly outnumbered. Owen studied the scene below for a moment longer. "We need a diversion, something to draw most of them away from the ranch, giving us a chance to free your men." His gaze settled on Bridget. "And I think I know exactly what they'll chase." Understanding dawned on Bridget's face. "The map," she said. "They know I have it." Owen nodded. "You and Cooper will take the map and ride north, making sure you're spotted. I'll stay behind and free your ranch hands once enough of Hollister's men give chase." "That's too dangerous," Bridget protested immediately. "They'll kill you if they find you." "And they'll kill all of us if we don't separate them," Owen countered. "This is our best chance." Cooper, who had been scanning the activity below, suddenly gripped Owen's shoulder. "We may have another problem. Look who just rode in." From the direction of Silver Peak came a small party of riders, led by a familiar figure, Sheriff Dawson. As they watched, Dawson dismounted and approached Sanderson and Hollister, showing none of the hostility one would expect from a lawman confronting notorious outlaws. "He's with them," Cooper said, his voice tight with anger and betrayal. "The whole time my own boss." "That explains how the Hollisters always seem to stay one step ahead of the law," Owen remarked grimly. "We can't count on any help from Silver Peak now." Bridget's mind raced, trying to absorb these new complications. "What about Michael, if the sheriff is involved?" "Doc Miller isn't," Cooper assured her. "He's a good man. He'll protect your brother." Their planning was interrupted by the sound of a horse in distress, a high, pained whinny that cut through the air. One of their mounts, left in the gully, had somehow injured itself. "They'll have heard that," Owen said tersely, already moving back toward their horses. "We need to go now." Sure enough, several riders from the ranch were already mounting up, preparing to investigate the sound. Abandoning stealth for speed, Owen, Bridget, and Cooper ran for their horses, reaching them just as the injured animal Cooper's mount tried to rise on what was clearly a broken leg. "Take mine," Cooper told Bridget, helping her onto his secondary mount, a sturdy buckskin. "I'll stay with this one and buy you some time." "We can't leave you," Bridget argued, even as Owen swung into his saddle. "You have to," Cooper insisted. "That map is too important. Get to Carson City, find Marshal Earp, tell him everything." He drew both his revolvers. "Now go." Owen leaned down to clasp the deputy's shoulder. "We'll come back for you," he promised. Cooper's weathered face creased in a grim smile. "See that you do." He turned to face the approaching riders, positioning himself behind the injured horse for cover. With a last grateful look at the brave deputy, Bridget urged her borrowed mount forward, following Owen as they galloped away from the ranch, not north as originally planned, but west, toward the mountains where the terrain would offer more opportunities to evade pursuit. Behind them, gunfire erupted as Cooper engaged the first of the Hollister men to arrive. The sound spurred their horses to greater speed, carrying them away from the immediate danger but toward an uncertain future. For hours they rode, pushing their mounts as hard as they dared across the rugged landscape. Owen led them on a circuitous route designed to confuse any pursuers, occasionally doubling back or crossing streams to break their trail. By nightfall, they had reached the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, where Owen finally called a halt in a sheltered canyon with a small spring. As they dismounted, Bridget's legs nearly buckled beneath her, unaccustomed to such prolonged riding. Owen caught her arm, steadying her with a touch that lingered longer than necessary. "You did well," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "Many men couldn't have kept that pace." Bridget straightened, drawing strength from his approval. "What now?" "We can't go back to Silver Peak or Tonopah Junction, and Carson City is at least 3 days' ride from here." Owen unsaddled the horses while Bridget gathered wood for a small, carefully concealed fire. "We head north," he decided. "There's a settlement called Genoa about a day and a half's ride from here. We can resupply there and send a message to Marshal Earp." As the darkness deepened around them, they sat close to the tiny fire, speaking in hushed tones about what they had witnessed at the ranch and what it might mean. "Sanderson, the Hollisters, Sheriff Dawson, they're all working together," Bridget mused, accepting a strip of dried beef from Owen's meager supplies. "But why? What could my father's claim be worth that would unite a respectable mine owner with outlaws?" "Your brother mentioned gold," Owen reminded her. "That's enough to turn many men dishonest, but I suspect there's more to it." He hesitated, then added, "Have you looked closely at the map?" Bridget removed the locket from around her neck, carefully extracting the folded paper within. By the flickering firelight, they examined the detailed drawing, noting the precise notations her father had made regarding elevations, rock formations, and potential veins. "Look here," Owen said, pointing to a small symbol in the corner of the map. "That's a surveyor's mark for a boundary line. Your father's claim isn't just valuable because of what's in it, it's valuable because of where it is." Understanding dawned on Bridget's face. "It connects existing claims," she realized. "Whoever controls this land controls access to multiple mining sites." Owen nodded. "And in mining, access is everything. Your father may have discovered not just a rich vein, but a strategic location that could control the flow of ore from an entire region." They studied the map for a while longer before Bridget carefully refolded it and returned it to the locket. As she did so, her fingers brushed against Owen's, sending an unexpected warmth through her despite the chill of the night air. "Why did you become a bounty hunter?" she asked suddenly, wanting to know more about this man who had risked so much for her. Owen was quiet for so long that Bridget thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and reflective. "After the war, I drifted, tried ranching for a while, then scouting. Nothing seemed to fit." He poked at the fire with a stick, watching the sparks rise into the darkness. Then one day in Cheyenne, I saw a man shoot a shopkeeper in cold blood over $5. The local law couldn't find him, but I tracked him for 2 weeks across 3 territories. And when you found him, Bridget prompted gently, I brought him back to Cheyenne to stand trial. He hung a week later. Owen's face remained impassive, but something in his tone suggested the memory still affected him. It wasn't about the bounty. It was about setting something right in a world that had gone very wrong. Bridget nodded, understanding more about Owen Zachary in that moment than words alone could convey. He was a man seeking order in chaos, justice in a lawless land not so different from her father, who had believed in building something lasting in the harsh Nevada territory. We should get some rest, Owen said, changing the subject. I'll take first watch. Wake me in 4 hours, Bridget insisted. You need sleep too. Owen's mouth quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Yes, madam. As Bridget wrapped herself in a blanket near the fire, her thoughts drifted to Michael, hoping he remained safe in Silver Peak despite the sheriff's betrayal. She thought of Cooper, facing down the Hollister men to buy them time to escape. And most persistently, she thought of Owen, whose steady presence had become her anchor in the storm that had engulfed her life. With these thoughts swirling in her mind, she drifted into an uneasy sleep. Her hand instinctively curled around the locket that now represented not just a connection to her father, but perhaps her future as well. Dawn broke with a pallid light filtering through a layer of high clouds, promising a cooler day than the one before. Owen, who had allowed Bridget to sleep through the night despite her insistence on taking a watch, was already saddling the horses when she awoke. You should have woken me, she chided, accepting the cup of coffee he offered the last of their meager supplies. Owen shrugged. You needed the rest more than I did. He didn't mention that he had spent much of the night simply watching her sleep, finding an unexpected peace in the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. They set out as soon as the light was strong enough to navigate safely, heading northwest toward Genoa. The terrain grew increasingly mountainous, requiring them to pick their way carefully along game trails and old Indian paths. Despite the difficult going, Bridget found herself appreciating the stark beauty of the landscape, the towering pines, the glimpses of snow-capped peaks in the distance, the occasional burst of wildflowers in sheltered valleys. Around midday, they paused at a small stream to water the horses and rest briefly. Owen, ever vigilant, continuously scanned their back trail for signs of pursuit. You think they're following us? Bridget asked, splashing cold water on her face to wash away the dust of travel. Almost certainly, Owen replied, his expression grave. Men like Hollister and Sanderson don't give up easily, and now they know you have the map. Bridget touched the locket at her throat. Perhaps we should separate, she suggested reluctantly. I could continue to Genoa while you circle back to help Cooper and check on Michael. Owen's response was immediate and firm. No, we stay together. The intensity in his voice surprised them both, and he added more moderately, it's safer that way. The truth, which Owen wasn't ready to fully acknowledge even to himself, was that the thought of Bridget facing danger alone was unbearable. In the short time since their paths had crossed in Tanapa Junction, she had become more important to him than any bounty or quest for justice. They resumed their journey, the horses picking up a steady rhythm that ate away at the miles. As the afternoon wore on, the clouds thickened and darkened, promising rain before nightfall. Owen began looking for suitable shelter, aware that a storm in these mountains could be dangerous for travelers caught unprepared. There's an old line cabin about 2 miles ahead, he told Bridget as thunder rumbled in the distance. Used by the Pony Express riders years ago. If we push, we can reach it before the storm hits. They urged their tired mounts to a faster pace, reaching the abandoned cabin just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. It was a simple structure, one room with a stone fireplace. Its roof partially collapsed at one end, but still sound enough to provide shelter from the elements. Inside, they found evidence of recent use: ashes in the fireplace, a stack of firewood, even some basic supplies left by previous travelers adhering to the unwritten code of frontier hospitality. While Owen tended to the horses in a lean-to adjacent to the cabin, Bridget set about making the interior as comfortable as possible, building a fire and preparing a simple meal from the supplies they'd found. As night fell and the storm intensified, they sat before the fire, the howling wind and drumming rain creating a strange sense of isolation and intimacy. For the first time since fleeing the T Ranch, they had a moment to truly rest and take stock of their situation. "Tell me about your life before all this," Owen said, genuinely curious about the woman who had shown such courage and resilience in the face of danger. Bridget smiled, the firelight casting a warm glow on her features. "It was simple, but good. After Mother died when I was 16, I took over running the household. Pa taught me about the ranch business, said I had a better head for figures than Michael." Her expression grew nostalgic. "We were building something worthwhile, improving the bloodlines of our cattle, expanding our grazing lands. Pa always said the future was in the land, not in what could be dug out of it. Yet he kept the silver claim," Owen noted. "As insurance, apparently," Bridget agreed. "Though I still don't understand why he never told me about it." She looked at Owen curiously. "What about you? You mentioned Illinois. Is that where you're from?" Owen nodded, his eyes on the fire. "Small farm near Springfield. My father built it from nothing, working land no one else wanted." A rare smile touched his lips. He used to say that stubbornness was the most important trait a farmer could have. "You must take after him," Bridget observed with gentle humor. Owen's smile widened briefly before fading. In some ways, not enough perhaps. He fell silent, lost in memories. Bridget sensed there was more to his story, pain he kept carefully guarded, but she didn't press. Instead, she said, "Thank you for everything you've done. Most men would have ridden on after that shootout in Tonopah Junction." Owen looked up from the fire, meeting her gaze directly. "I'm not most men." "No," Bridget agreed softly. "You're not." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings, the crackle of the fire and the drumming of the rain creating a cocoon of sound that enveloped them. Owen found himself studying Bridget's face, the delicate curve of her cheek, the determination in her jawline, the depth of emotion in her green eyes. He had known many women in his travels, but none who combined such strength with such grace. Almost without conscious thought, he reached across the space between them, his hand covering hers where it rested on her knee. Bridget's breath caught, but she didn't pull away, instead turning her hand to intertwine her fingers with his. "Bridget," Owen began, his voice rough with emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel, let alone express. "When this is over," a sudden crash outside interrupted him, the sound of something heavy falling or being knocked over. In an instant, Owen was on his feet, gun drawn, positioning himself between Bridget and the door. "Stay here," he whispered, moving cautiously toward the window. Peering through a gap in the shutters, Owen could make out shapes moving in the darkness. Despite the driving rain, at least 3 figures approaching the cabin from different directions. Whether Hollister men or simple bandits taking advantage of the storm to rob travelers, the threat was immediate and real. Owen moved back to Bridget, who had also drawn her gun. "We have company," he said tersely. 3, maybe 4 men surrounding the cabin. Bridget's expression hardened with resolve. "What's the plan?" Owen quickly assessed their options. The cabin had only two exits, the main door and a small window at the rear that might be large enough for Bridget to squeeze through. The roof was a possibility, but the storm made it a dangerous choice. "I'll engage them from the front," he decided. "You slip out the back window and circle around to the horses. If you can get away, ride for Genoa and find help." "I told you before," Bridget said firmly. "I won't leave you." Before Owen could argue, a voice called out from outside, a voice that froze them both in surprise and confusion. "Zachary, Miss Taylor, it's Cooper, don't shoot." Owen moved cautiously back to the window, his gun still ready. "Prove it's you, Cooper," he called back. "You left me with a horse with a broken leg, and I told you I'd buy you time to escape," the voice replied. "Now open up before we all drown out here." Owen exchanged a glance with Bridget, then moved to unbar the door. As it swung open, Deputy Cooper stumbled in, followed by two bedraggled figures that caused Bridget to cry out in recognition. "Michael! Tom!" She rushed forward to embrace her brother, who looked pale but steady on his feet, and Tom Jenkins, the foreman of the T-Bar T Ranch. As Owen secured the door behind them, the new arrivals shed their rain-soaked outer garments and moved gratefully toward the fire. Questions tumbled over each other as Bridget fussed over Michael, insisting on checking his wound despite his protestations that Doc Miller had declared him fit to travel. "How did you find us?" Owen asked Cooper once the initial commotion had settled. The deputy, looking exhausted but grimly satisfied, explained how he had managed to wound two of his attackers before retreating into the hills. "I circled back to Silver Peak by a different route," he said. "Found the Doc's place under watch by Hollister men, but they weren't expecting someone to come in through the back window. I was ready to leave anyway," Michael added, his arm around his sister's shoulders. "When Cooper told me about what happened at the ranch, I knew we had to find you." "Tom here was in town too," Cooper continued, nodding toward the ranch foreman. "He'd ridden in to fetch the Doc for one of your hands who broke his arm. Lucky timing." "The others?" Bridget asked anxiously, looking at Tom. "Pete, Jackson, and Will." Tom's weathered face darkened. "In bad shape when I left them, Miss Bridget. Those Hollister boys worked them over good trying to find out where you'd gone with the map, but they were alive." "And still at the ranch?" Owen asked. Tom nodded. "Under guard. Sanderson's men were using the bunkhouse as a headquarters of sorts." "The main house is." He trailed off, looking apologetically at Bridget. "I saw," she said quietly. "It's just a building. It can be rebuilt." Her hand moved to the locket around her neck. "What matters is that we have this and we're all still alive." Michael's eyes followed her movement. "The map. You figured out how to open the locket." "Owen did," Bridget replied, giving the bounty hunter a grateful look. "We know why Sanderson and the Hollisters want it so badly now. It's not just the silver and gold, it's the location. It connects existing claims, gives control over access routes." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. Pa mentioned something about the key to the whole valley once. I didn't understand what he meant at the time." Tom Jenkins, who had been silently warming himself by the fire, suddenly spoke up. "There's more to it than that," he said, his voice grave. "Your pa found something else in that claim, something he only told me about because I was with him when he discovered it." All eyes turned to the foreman who had worked for Thomas Taylor since before the war. "Quicksilver," Tom continued. "Mercury, a massive deposit bigger than any found in these parts before." The significance of this revelation wasn't lost on any of them. Mercury was essential for processing gold and silver ore using the amalgamation method common in Nevada's mines. Whoever controlled the mercury supply effectively controlled the mining industry itself. That's why Sanderson allied with the Hollisters, Owen realized. With that claim, he could strangle his competition, dictate terms to every mine owner in the territory. "And why Pa kept it secret?" Bridget added, pieces falling into place. He understood the power it represented and the danger. Michael, who had been listening intently, suddenly swayed on his feet. Despite his protests that he was fine, it was clear that the journey had taken a toll on his recovering body. Bridget and Tom helped him to a corner of the cabin where they made a comfortable pallet from blankets. As Michael rested and Tom checked on the horses, Cooper drew Owen and Bridget aside for a private conversation. "There's something else you should know," he said, keeping his voice low. "When I was in Silver Peak, I overheard Hoffman talking to one of Sanderson's men. They're expecting a federal mining commissioner to arrive within the week, someone who can officially record claims and settle disputes. Sanderson plans to file on Thomas Taylor's claim," Owen guessed. Cooper nodded. "With forged documents, most likely. And with Sheriff Dawson in his pocket, there won't be anyone to challenge them." "Unless we reach the commissioner first," Bridget said, determination hardening her voice. "With the original map and our testimony, it's risky," Cooper warned. "Sanderson and the Hollisters will have men watching every approach to Silver Peak." Owen had been silent, his mind working through the possibilities and dangers. "We don't go to Silver Peak," he decided. "We intercept the commissioner before he reaches town." The main road from Carson City passes through Genoa, exactly where we were headed. The plan began to take shape. They would continue to Genoa, send a telegram to Marshal Earp detailing the conspiracy, and wait for the mining commissioner's arrival. With the original map as evidence and multiple witnesses to the Hollister gang's crimes, they would have a chance of exposing Sanderson's scheme and bringing the outlaws to justice. As the others discussed logistics, Owen found himself watching Bridget, the intensity in her expression as she contributed to the planning, the gentle way she checked on her brother, the flash of fire in her eyes when Cooper mentioned Sanderson's name. In the midst of danger and uncertainty, one thing had become increasingly clear to Owen Zachary. Whatever the outcome of their confrontation with the Hollisters, his life had been irrevocably changed by meeting Bridget Taylor. The storm continued through the night, but by morning had subsided to a gentle drizzle that promised to clear by midday. They set out early, traveling in pairs on the 3 horses they had available: Owen and Bridget, Cooper and Michael, with Tom riding alone as the most experienced horseman among them. The rain-washed landscape glistened in the morning light, creating an illusion of peace that belied the tension all 5 travelers felt. They rode alert, weapons ready, expecting an ambush at every narrow pass or dense copse of trees. Yet the hours passed uneventfully, allowing them to make good time toward Genoa. By late afternoon, they caught sight of the settlement, a small but prosperous community nestled at the base of the Sierra Nevada. Unlike many frontier towns, Genoa had an air of permanence, with substantial buildings and well-maintained roads. As Nevada's first permanent settlement, established in 1851, it had already developed the institutions of civilization: a courthouse, several churches, and most importantly for their purposes, a telegraph office. Rather than riding directly into town, where they might be spotted by any Hollister men watching the main road, Owen led the group to a small ranch on the outskirts where he had once helped the owner recover stolen cattle. Jonas Wheeler, a gruff but honest rancher in his 60s, welcomed them without question when Owen briefly explained their situation. "Any enemy of the mining companies is a friend of mine," Wheeler declared, ushering them into his modest home where his wife, Martha, immediately began preparing a meal large enough to feed twice their number. "They've been buying up water rights all through the valley, trying to squeeze out small ranchers like me." While the others rested and ate, Owen and Cooper rode into Genoa to send their telegram to Marshal Earp and gather information about the mining commissioner's expected arrival. They returned as darkness fell, bringing news that both encouraged and concerned the waiting group. "The commissioner is already on his way," Owen reported as they gathered around Wheeler's kitchen table. "Due to arrive in Genoa tomorrow afternoon on the Carson City stage." "That's sooner than we expected," Bridget noted, glancing at her brother, who still looked pale but was regaining his strength with each passing hour. Cooper nodded grimly. "And there's more. Hollister men were seen in town this morning asking questions. They know we're headed this way." "Or at least suspect it," Owen amended. "They're covering all the likely routes we might take." He looked at Wheeler. "Is there somewhere more secure we can spend the night? Somewhere not connected to you in case they come asking questions?" Wheeler thought for a moment, then nodded. "The old Morrison place, about a mile north of town. Been abandoned since the old man died last winter. It's not much, but it's solid and well hidden in a stand of cottonwoods." With Wheeler's directions, and a supply of food provided by Martha, they set out under cover of darkness for the abandoned homestead. As Wheeler had promised, it was well concealed and defensible, with clear lines of sight in all directions, a perfect place to wait for the stage and plan their next move. That night, as the others slept inside the small cabin, Owen took first watch, positioning himself on the low porch where he could observe the approach from town. He wasn't surprised when Bridget joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the night's chill. "You should be resting," he said, though he was glad for her company. "I've tried," she replied, settling beside him on the porch step. "Too much on my mind." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the moon casting silver light across the landscape, the distant howl of a coyote the only sound to disturb the night. "What will you do?" Bridget finally asked. "After this is over, I mean. Will you go back to bounty hunting?" Owen considered the question. It was one he'd been asking himself with increasing frequency. "I don't know," he admitted. "For a long time, the hunt was all that mattered, finding men who'd done wrong and bringing them to justice. It gave me a purpose when I needed one. And now—" Bridget prompted when he fell silent. Owen turned to look at her, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. "Now I'm not so sure it's enough," he said quietly. Bridget held his gaze, her heart quickening at what she saw in his eyes. "What would be enough, Owen?" He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she chose, and brushed a strand of copper hair from her face. "A home," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Someone to come back to." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then, with a gentleness that belied his usual stoic demeanor, Owen leaned forward and kissed her, a brief, tender gesture that asked a question neither of them was ready to fully articulate. When they parted, Bridget's eyes were bright with emotion. "Is that your way of saying you might stick around after this is over?" she asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Might be," Owen replied, his own lips curving in a rare, genuine smile. "If I had a reason to." Bridget's hand found his in the darkness. "I think you might find one." The next morning brought clear skies and a renewed sense of purpose. Their plan was straightforward. Cooper and Tom would position themselves at the edge of town to watch for the stage, while Owen, Bridget, and Michael would wait at the Morrison place until they received word of the commissioner's arrival. Then they would intercept the stage before it reached Genoa proper, presenting their evidence and requesting the commissioner's protection until Marshal Earp could arrive. As midday approached, tension mounted. Cooper and Tom had been gone since dawn, and though Genoa was only a mile away, the wait seemed interminable. Owen paced the small cabin, checking and rechecking his weapons, while Bridget and Michael reviewed the evidence they would present to the commissioner. "The map alone might not be enough," Michael pointed out. "Sanderson could claim it's a forgery." "That's why we need Tom's testimony," Bridget replied. He was with Pa when the claim was discovered, and we have the locket itself. Pa's initials are engraved inside. Plus, Cooper can testify about Sheriff Dawson's corruption. Michael nodded, though he still looked concerned. I just hope it's enough to convince a government official who's probably used to mining companies throwing their weight around. Owen, who had been listening while watching the road from the window, turned to join the conversation. It's not just about the evidence, he said. It's about getting to the commissioner before Sanderson and the Hollisters can influence him. Once he hears our side and understands the extent of their crimes, he'll have to act or become complicit himself. The sound of approaching horses interrupted their discussion. Owen moved swiftly to the window, rifle ready, then relaxed as he recognized Cooper and Tom returning at a gallop. "Stage is coming," Cooper announced as he dismounted. "Due in less than an hour. But we've got trouble. Hollister himself is in town with at least 6 men, and they're watching the road." "Sanderson?" Owen asked tersely. Tom shook his head. "No sign of him, but that doesn't mean he's not nearby." They quickly revised their plan. Instead of intercepting the stage in town, they would catch it at a point about 3 miles east, where the road curved around a large outcropping known locally as Devil's Rock. The narrow pass would force the stage to slow, giving them the opportunity they needed. "What if Hollister's men are watching that spot too?" Michael asked, voicing the concern they all shared. "Then we fight," Owen said simply. "But I don't think they will be. They're expecting us to approach from the west or north, not circle around to the east." Within minutes, they were mounted and riding not north toward town, but south and then east in a wide arc that would bring them to Devil's Rock ahead of the stage. The terrain was open enough to allow them to make good time, yet provided sufficient cover to avoid being spotted by any watchers on the main road. As they approached the landmark, Owen divided them into strategic positions. Cooper and Tom would stop the stage from the front, using their deputy's badge to lend authority to the interruption. Michael would remain hidden with a rifle, covering them in case of trouble. Owen and Bridget would approach the stage directly to speak with the commissioner. "Remember," Owen cautioned as they took their positions, "this needs to look official, not like an ambush. We want the commissioner to trust us long enough to hear our evidence." Bridget adjusted the locket around her neck, ensuring it was visible. "He'll listen," she said with quiet confidence. The truth has a way of making itself heard. The distant sound of the stage announced its approach. Before it came into view, the rhythmic pounding of hooves, the creak of wheels, the occasional shout from the driver. As it rounded the bend and entered the narrow pass, Cooper and Tom moved their horses onto the road, hands raised to signal the driver to stop. For a tense moment, it seemed the stage might attempt to continue past them, but the driver finally pulled back on the reins, bringing the 6-horse team to a halt amid a cloud of dust. "What's the meaning of this?" the driver shouted, shotgun at the ready. "This is a federal stage." Cooper stepped forward, his badge prominently displayed. "Deputy Marshal Cooper out of Silver Peak. We need to speak with the mining commissioner on urgent business." From inside the stage came a stern voice. "I am Commissioner Wallace. What is this about, Deputy?" As Cooper explained that they had evidence of corruption and criminal conspiracy involving the Silver Peak Mining Company, Owen and Bridget approached from the side of the road. The commissioner, a distinguished man in his 50s with silver-streaked black hair and a neatly trimmed beard, watched them with an expression of cautious interest. "Miss Taylor," Owen said formally, "would you please show the commissioner your father's map?" Bridget removed the locket and carefully extracted the folded paper, stepping forward to hand it to Wallace, who had descended from the stage to better assess the situation. "This is a claim map for a silver deposit in the North Ridge area," Bridget explained as Wallace examined it. "It was hidden in this locket by my father, Thomas Taylor, before his death last year. We have reason to believe he was murdered for this claim by Jeb Hollister and Clayton Sanderson. Wallace's eyebrows rose at the mention of these names. These are serious accusations, young woman. Sanderson is one of the most prominent mine owners in Nevada territory. And Jeb Hollister is a wanted murderer, Owen interjected, stepping forward. I'm Owen Zachary, federal bounty hunter. I've been tracking the Hollister gang for months for killings in California. Now they've allied with Sanderson and corrupted local law enforcement, including Sheriff Dawson of Silver Peak. As Wallace absorbed this information, examining the map with growing interest, a shout from Michael disrupted the conversation. Riders coming, at least a dozen, moving fast. Owen's hand moved to his gun as he scanned the horizon. In the distance, a cloud of dust marked the approach of a large group of horsemen from the direction of Genoa. Hollisters, Cooper confirmed grimly, having climbed a nearby rock for a better view. And Sanderson's with them. Commissioner Wallace looked alarmed but not panicked. You have me at a disadvantage, Mr. Zachary. How do I know your claims are legitimate and this isn't some elaborate scheme to defraud the government? Owen met the commissioner's gaze directly. Because in about 5 minutes, those men will try to kill us all, including you, sir, to get their hands on that map. But if you'll trust us, we can protect you until Marshal Earp arrives from Carson City. Wallace studied Owen's face, then Bridget's, making some internal calculation that would determine all their fates. Finally, he nodded. Very well. I'll hear your evidence, but we can't stay here, we're too exposed. The stage is too slow to outrun them, Tom pointed out, his experienced eye gauging the approaching riders, and too conspicuous. There's an old line shack about a mile from here, Cooper suggested. Defensible position, only one approach. Wallace turned to his driver and the shotgun messenger. Williams, Johnson, take the stage back to Genoa at full speed. Tell the telegraph operator to contact Marshal Earp in Carson City immediately. Say it's a federal emergency. As the stage departed in a cloud of dust, the remaining group, Owen, Bridget, Michael, Cooper, Tom, and Commissioner Wallace, mounted quickly and rode for the line shack, taking a route through rugged terrain that would slow their pursuers. Behind them, the riders split, some continuing after the stage while the main group adjusted course to follow them. The line shack appeared before them just as the sound of gunfire erupted in the distance. Cooper, riding last to cover their retreat, returned fire briefly before catching up with the others. Hollister himself is leading them, he reported as they dismounted and hurried inside the small structure. Sanderson's hanging back. They're about 5 minutes behind us. The shack, similar to the one where they had sheltered during the storm, offered minimal comfort but significant defensive advantages: thick log walls, a single door, 2 small windows with shutters, and a location on a slight rise that provided clear lines of sight in all directions. Owen quickly organized their defense, positioning Michael and Tom at the windows while Cooper guarded the door. Wallace, though unarmed, insisted on making himself useful by helping Bridget prepare the limited medical supplies they had brought in case of injury. Your father, Wallace said quietly to Bridget as they worked. Thomas Taylor, I knew him, you know. He did survey work for the government before settling on his ranch. Bridget looked up in surprise. You knew my father, Wallace nodded. A good man, honest to a fault. He sent some reports to my office about potential mining sites that should be protected rather than exploited areas where unrestricted mining would damage watersheds or destroy grazing land. He glanced toward the window, where they could hear the approaching riders. I always wondered why he stopped corresponding. He was killed, Bridget said, her voice tight with emotion. We thought it was an accident, but now we know different, Wallace finished grimly. If what you say about Sanderson and the Hollisters is true, Your father's death was just the beginning of their plan to control the entire region's mining operations. Their conversation was cut short by Owen's terse announcement. They're here. About 20 men surrounding the shack. Through the windows, they could see the Hollister gang and Sanderson's men taking positions behind rocks and trees, their intentions clear. A voice called out Jeb Hollister himself, his southern drawl distinct even at a distance. "We know you've got the commissioner in there, Zachary. Send him out with the Taylor woman and the map, and the rest of you can ride away." Owen exchanged glances with the others before responding. "Not happening, Hollister. The commissioners heard our evidence. It's over." A harsh laugh was the only reply before a barrage of gunfire peppered the shack, bullets thudding into the logs and splintering the shutters. Everyone inside dropped low, returning fire selectively to conserve ammunition. "They're trying to pin us down while they work their way closer," Cooper observed as a momentary lull fell. Classic Hollister tactic. Owen nodded, his mind racing through their options. They had limited ammunition, no water source inside the shack, and no reinforcements on the way unless the stage had made it back to Genoa, and the telegram had been sent. Against 20 armed men, their chances were slim unless they could change the dynamics of the standoff. "We need to split them up," he decided, quickly outlining a plan that was audacious but potentially effective. "Bridget and I will slip out the back during the next exchange of fire. We'll circle around and draw off some of their men, giving the rest of you a fighting chance here." "It's too risky," Michael protested immediately. "They'll kill you both if they catch you." "Not if they think we have the map," Bridget countered, quickly understanding Owen's strategy. She removed the locket from around her neck and handed it to Wallace. "Keep this safe. We'll make them think we have it with us." Wallace accepted the locket with a solemn nod. "Be careful, both of you. Your father would be proud of your courage, Miss Taylor." As another volley of gunfire erupted, Owen and Bridget prepared to make their move. They would exit through a small rear window that was partially obscured by overgrown brush, using the noise of the gunfight to cover their departure. "Stay close to me," Owen told Bridget as they waited for Cooper's signal that the way was clear. "And remember, if we get separated, head for Genoa." Bridget met his gaze steadily. "We won't get separated," she said with quiet determination. "Not this time." Cooper's hand signal came, and they moved quickly. Owen went first, easing through the narrow window and immediately pressing himself against the back wall of the shack. Bridget followed, her slender frame making the passage easier. Together, they crept along the wall until they reached the corner, then darted into the cover of a dense thicket of juniper. From there, they made their way carefully around the perimeter of the clearing, staying low and using every bit of available cover. Twice they froze as Hollister men passed within yards of their position, but the outlaws' attention was focused on the shack, not on the possibility of escapees. When they reached the edge of the tree line on the far side of the clearing, Owen spotted what he was looking for: two horses left tied loosely to a fallen log, their riders having moved forward on foot to join the assault on the shack. "There's our chance," he whispered to Bridget. "When I give the signal, run for those horses. Mount up and ride east as fast as you can. Don't wait for me." Bridget gripped his arm. "I told you before, I won't leave you." Owen turned to her, his expression intense. "Bridget, listen to me. What matters is drawing enough of them away from the shack to give the others a fighting chance. If we both make it to the horses, we ride together. If not..." He left the implication hanging. Bridget wanted to argue further, but the urgency of their situation silenced her protest. With a reluctant nod, she readied herself to run. Owen waited until a particularly heavy exchange of fire erupted from the shack, then gave the signal. Together, they sprinted across the open ground toward the horses. They had covered half the distance when a shout went up from one of the Hollister men. There, two of them making a break for it. Gunfire immediately shifted in their direction, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels as they ran. Owen pulled his revolver and returned fire over his shoulder, not aiming to hit, but to force their pursuers to take cover. They reached the horses just as Jeb Hollister's voice rang out above the gunfire. "It's the Taylor woman. She's got the map. After them." The diversion was working. Already, several riders were mounting up to pursue them, diverting attention and firepower from the shack. Owen helped Bridget onto one of the horses, then swung onto the other. Without a moment's hesitation, they kicked their mounts into a gallop, heading east into increasingly rugged terrain where they hoped to lose their pursuers. Behind them, they could hear Hollister shouting orders, organizing a pursuit party while maintaining the siege of the line shack. The pounding of hooves told them at least half a dozen riders were giving chase exactly as they had hoped. For nearly an hour, they rode hard, pushing their borrowed horses to their limits. The terrain worked to their advantage, allowing them to use narrow passes and steep inclines to slow their pursuers. Yet each time they thought they might have lost them, the sound of pursuit would reach their ears once more. "They're persistent," Bridget called to Owen as they paused briefly to let their winded horses rest in the shelter of a rock overhang. "And they know this country better than we do." Owen scanned the horizon, noting the position of the sun and the lay of the land. "We need to find a defensible position before dark," he decided. "Somewhere we can make a stand if we have to." As they prepared to mount up again, the distant crack of a rifle froze them in place. It had come not from behind where their pursuers were, but from ahead the direction they were heading. "More Hollister men," Bridget whispered, her hand moving to her gun. Owen shook his head slightly, his expression intent as he listened. Different sound, sharper. Military rifle, not a cowboy's carbine. The rifle cracked again, followed by the unmistakable sound of a bugle call, the cavalry's charge signal. Owen's face broke into a rare, broad smile. "Marshal Earp," he said with certainty, "and he's brought the cavalry with him." They mounted quickly and rode toward the sounds of battle, staying cautious but moving with renewed purpose. As they crested a rise, the scene below confirmed Owen's prediction. A detachment of U.S. cavalry engaged with what appeared to be the remainder of the Hollister gang. At the center of the action, a tall figure in a marshal's duster was directing the soldiers with calm authority. James Earp, Owen identified him for Bridget. Wyatt's cousin, as I mentioned, one of the best lawmen in the Western Territories. They approached carefully, identifying themselves before riding into the midst of the confrontation. Marshal Earp greeted Owen with a nod of recognition. "Zachary, should have known you'd be in the middle of this mess." His sharp eyes took in Bridget. "Miss Taylor, I presume." "The stage driver reached Genoa with your story just as I was arriving from Carson City. Fortunate timing." "The others," Bridget said urgently. "They're still at the line shack, under siege by the rest of Hollister's men and Sanderson's forces." Earp immediately dispatched half his cavalry unit to relieve the shack, while organizing the remainder to secure the captured outlaws. Among those already in custody, Bridget recognized several of the men who had attacked them in Tonopah Junction. "Hollister himself?" Owen asked. "Still at large," Earp replied grimly. "But not for long. We've got men coming in from every direction he's boxed in." As they spoke, riders appeared from the direction of the line shack. Cooper and Tom, along with Commissioner Wallace and Michael, all looking battered but triumphant. Behind them rode cavalry troops escorting more prisoners. The reunion was joyful but brief, as Earp pressed them for full statements regarding the conspiracy. Wallace produced the locket with its precious map, officially taking it into federal custody as evidence. "Sanderson." Owen asked Cooper as they compared notes. "Captured, trying to slip away while Hollister kept us pinned down," Cooper reported with satisfaction. "Sheriff Dawson, too. They'll hang for this or at least spend the rest of their lives in prison." As night fell, they made camp with the cavalry unit, the immediate danger past but the work of justice just beginning. Statements were taken, evidence catalogued, and plans made for transporting the prisoners to Carson City for trial. In a quiet moment by the campfire, Owen found himself sitting beside Bridget, watching as she stared thoughtfully into the flames. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly. She smiled, though her expression remained pensive. "I was thinking about my father, about how all of this started with his decision to keep that claim secret." She looked up at Owen. He must have known the danger it represented, known that men like Sanderson would stop at nothing to control it. "He was protecting you and Michael," Owen suggested. "Waiting for the right time, perhaps, or for the right people to help ensure the claim was used for good, not exploitation." Bridget nodded slowly. "Commissioner Wallace said he's going to recommend that part of the claim be designated as protected federal land, the watersheds and grazing areas Pa identified in his reports. The mining will be regulated to prevent the kind of abuses Sanderson was planning." "A fitting tribute to your father's vision," Owen said. They sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts as the events of the past days began to settle into perspective. Finally, Bridget turned to Owen, her expression serious. "What happens now?" she asked. "With Hollister captured or on the run, your bounty hunt is over. Will you move on to the next one?" Owen studied her face in the firelight, seeing the question behind the question. "I don't know," he admitted. "For a long time, the hunt was all that mattered. It gave me purpose, direction." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But lately, I've been thinking there might be more to life than always moving on." Bridget's breath caught slightly. "Such as?" "Such as rebuilding a certain ranch outside Tonopah Junction," Owen suggested, his voice low and intimate. "Raising cattle, maybe horses too. Having a place to call home after all these years of drifting." Hope bloomed in Bridget's eyes, but she tempered it with practical considerations. "Rebuilding the T-Bar-T will be a massive undertaking. The house is gone, the outbuildings damaged. It would take a considerable investment of time and money." "I have some savings," Owen replied. "Bounty hunting pays well if you stay alive long enough." A hint of his rare smile touched his lips. "And I hear the owner of that ranch might be sitting on a valuable silver and mercury claim that could fund the rest." Bridget laughed softly, the sound warming Owen more than the nearby fire. "The owner might be," she agreed, "but she'd need a partner, someone steady, someone who knows ranching, someone willing to put down roots after years on the trail." Owen reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers as they had in the cabin during the storm. "I might know someone who fits that description," he said, "if he'd be welcome." Instead of answering with words, Bridget leaned forward and kissed him, not the brief, tentative kiss they had shared on the porch, but a deeper, more certain expression of feelings that had grown steadily since that moment in Tonopah Junction, when Owen had ridden through a hail of bullets to reach her side. When they parted, Owen's eyes held a light Bridget had never seen before, the look of a man who had found something he hadn't even known he was searching for. "I'd say he'd be very welcome," Bridget whispered, her smile radiant in the firelight. 2 weeks later, as the autumn sun cast long shadows across the partially rebuilt ranch house of the T-Bar-T, Bridget stood on the newly constructed porch, surveying the progress that had been made since their return. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air as workers, some from neighboring ranches, others hired with an advance from the government on the regulated mining rights to her father's claim, continued the rebuilding effort. The trials of Sanderson, Sheriff Dawson, and the captured Hollister men were set for the spring, with Commissioner Wallace himself overseeing the process to ensure justice was served. Jeb Hollister remained at large, having escaped the cavalry's net, but Marshal Earp had assured them that with his gang destroyed and his allies imprisoned, the notorious outlaw was unlikely to pose a threat to them again. Michael, fully recovered from his wound, had thrown himself into the ranch operations with renewed vigor, working alongside Tom Jenkins to restore their cattle herds and repair the damage to the outbuildings. The other ranch hands, Pete Jackson and Will, had also returned, their loyalty to the Taylor family undiminished by their ordeal at the hands of the Hollisters. Deputy Cooper, promoted to sheriff of Silver Peak after Dawson's arrest, rode out regularly to check on them and report on the progress of the investigation. His friendship had proven invaluable during the rebuilding, as had the continued support of Commissioner Wallace, who had taken a personal interest in ensuring that Thomas Taylor's vision for responsible land use was honored. But the most significant change at the T-Bar T was the presence of Owen Zachary. True to his word, he had stayed, investing both his savings and his considerable skills in the ranch's resurrection. More than that, he had brought a sense of security and stability that had been missing since Thomas Taylor's death, a quiet strength that complemented Bridget's determination and Michael's enthusiasm. As Bridget watched Owen working with the ranch hands to raise a new barn beam, she reflected on the unexpected turns her life had taken. The loss of her father, the discovery of his secret claim, the violence and danger that had followed all had led, somehow, to this moment of renewal and promise. Owen looked up, sensing her gaze, and smiled that rare, genuine smile that still made her heart skip. Excusing himself from the work crew, he crossed the yard to join her on the porch. "House should be finished before the first snow," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Barn might take a little longer, but we'll have shelter for the stock at least." Bridget nodded, leaning comfortably against the porch railing. "Michael says the new breeding bulls should arrive next week. And Tom's found a small herd of horses we might be able to acquire from a rancher north of Carson City who's selling out." Owen's expression grew thoughtful. "I was thinking about horses," he said. "Not just ranch stock, but quality breeding lines. There's good money in supplying cavalry mounts and with my connections." He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "If you agree, that is, it's your ranch." Bridget turned to face him directly. "Our ranch," she corrected gently, "if that's still what you want." Owen's hand found hers, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "It is," he said simply, "more than I've wanted anything in a long time." For a moment they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the activity around the ranch yard. Then Bridget spoke again, her voice soft but clear. "Marshal Earp sent a telegram yesterday. He's offering you a position as a deputy U.S. Marshal based in Carson City." Owen looked surprised. He didn't mention he was considering that when we spoke in his office. "It would be steady work," Bridget continued, "more stable than bounty hunting. But it would also mean time away from the ranch." She hesitated. "I told him I'd give you the message, but that you had other commitments now." A question hovered in her words, not just about the marshal's offer, but about Owen's intentions, his readiness to truly settle in one place after years of constant movement. Owen recognized the unspoken concern behind her carefully neutral tone. "You told him right," he said firmly. "My bounty hunting days are over. My place is here now." He paused, then added with characteristic directness, "With you, Bridget, if you'll have me." The simple declaration, spoken without embellishment or flowery language, touched Bridget deeply. It was quintessentially Owen, honest, straightforward, and true. "I'll have you, Owen Zachary," she replied, her voice rich with emotion. Today and all the days to come. His arms encircled her then, drawing her close as his lips found hers in a kiss that sealed their commitment more effectively than any formal vow. Around them, the sounds of rebuilding continued, the rhythmic pounding of hammers, the calls of the workers, the lowing of cattle in the distant pasture, the symphony of a new beginning. When they parted, Owen kept his arms around her, his expression more open and relaxed than Bridget had ever seen it. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," he said. "That day in Tanapa Junction when I rode out to help you and your brother, what made you trust me? You knew nothing about me, yet you followed my instructions. Let me help you escape." Bridget considered the question, thinking back to that chaotic moment when their lives had first intersected. "It was what you said," she answered finally. "When you positioned yourself between us and the bullets, you told me you'd die before you'd let me fall, and I believed you." She smiled up at him. "I still do." Owen nodded slowly, remembering. "I meant it then," he said, "and I mean it now." In that moment, as the autumn sun gilded the newly raised beams of their home, Owen and Bridget stood at the threshold of a future neither could have imagined just weeks before, a future built not on silver claims or bounties, but on the more precious foundation of love, trust, and shared purpose. The road ahead would not always be smooth, but they would travel it together, their bond forged in the crucible of danger and strengthened by the promise of tomorrow. And in the years that followed, as the T-Bar Tea flourished once more under their joint stewardship, the story of the bounty hunter who rode between the bullets would be told and retold, a testament to the courage, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion that had transformed two separate journeys into one shared path, stretching toward a horizon bright with possibility.